He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Just die. I don't give a damn." I didn't flinch. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I just stood there for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle into my bones like cold winter air. Then I turned around, packed a single suitcase, and walked out of the house I built with my bare hands and every sacrifice I ever made. He thought he won. He thought he'd finally driven me into the shadows so he could claim my home, my savings, my silence. He had no idea the strength it takes to walk away from your own child and still love him in silence. What he didn't know was I took it all with me. Every penny I saved, every drop of life insurance meant for his future, every deed, every document. I took it, quietly, legally, permanently. He thought he could party in my home, boast to friends that he ran this place while mocking the woman who once gave him a kidney to keep him alive. He forgot the blood I donated when he almost died at 9. He forgot the nights I worked triple shifts so he could wear clean shoes to school. But karma doesn't always scream. Sometimes she moves in silence, like a mother leaving at midnight. And when the eviction notice finally landed on his doorstep, the boy who once told me to die came crawling to the same door he slammed on me. Only this time, the door didn't open. If you're still with me, this story is just getting started. Trust me, you don't want to miss what comes next. So go ahead and like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. I never had much, but what I did have, I gave all of it to my son. My name is Laverne Holloway, and raising Trey alone wasn't just a challenge, it was my life's mission. His father left when Trey was barely 2 years old, vanishing like a shadow in the night, leaving me with nothing but my own 2 hands and a heart full of love. I worked tirelessly, holding down 2 jobs just to keep food on the table and a roof over our heads. One of those jobs was cleaning hospital floors during the graveyard shift, a lonely grind while the world slept. I remember the night Trey was 9 and nearly lost to pneumonia. The doctors told me he needed blood immediately, and without hesitation, I gave them mine. It was the least I could do for my boy, the blood that ran through my veins, now flowing to keep him alive. That moment changed everything. It was a reminder that love isn't just a feeling, it's action, sacrifice, and sometimes pain. Years later, when he was 18, Trey's kidneys started to fail. The fear that gripped me was overwhelming, but I refused to lose him. I underwent surgery to give him one of my kidneys. Watching him recover, seeing his smile return, reminded me that every sacrifice was worth it. Through the pain and the struggle, I kept fighting. Every birthday, every Christmas, I made sure Trey never felt the sting of poverty. I sewed patches onto his clothes when I couldn't afford new ones, cooked meals from scraps, and stayed awake countless nights just worrying. I wanted him to know he was loved, not because of what we had, but because of how deeply I cared. Behind the scenes, I worked hard to secure his future, opening a life insurance policy worth $120,000 in his name. I deposited every spare dollar I could scrape together, hoping it would someday give him a better chance than I had. I never told him about the sacrifices, because sometimes love is silent. I wanted him to grow up feeling strong, not burdened by the weight of my struggles. But every penny, every night of exhaustion, every tear I wiped away was for him. I was determined to give him more than I ever had. I lived for him, and I would have given my last breath to see him succeed. But love, as I would soon learn, can be fragile and easily broken by the cruelty of words and choices made in youth. This was my story of endless love, deep sacrifice, and the quiet hope that one day my son would understand everything I did for him. And maybe, just maybe, he would appreciate it before it was too late. As Trey grew older, I watched a change come over him. The boy I once protected with every ounce of my being slowly slipped away, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Pride swallowed him whole, and respect seemed like a forgotten word. By the time he was 25, he stopped working entirely. The steady jobs I'd hoped would build his future vanished, replaced by late nights and endless parties. The house that had once been our refuge became a stage for loud laughter, careless friends, and a mocking voice that cut deeper than any blade. He'd bring his friends over, filling the rooms with noise and smoke, flaunting his freedom while laughing at the woman who'd given him everything. Living off the old lady, he'd say with a sneer, as if my sacrifices were nothing but a joke. I stood in silence as he belittled the years I'd poured into him, the nights I stayed awake nursing his fevers, the days I worked double shifts, the blood I gave without a second thought, all of it forgotten in his careless words. One night, the argument about rent spiraled out of control. I pleaded with him, trying to make him see the reality, the bills, the eviction notices, the consequences of his choices. But Trey's anger boiled over, his voice rising until it cut through the walls like glass breaking. Just die already. I don't give a shit what happens to you. He spat, eyes blazing with resentment. I stood there, stunned, numb. The words echoed in my mind, a haunting refrain I never thought I'd hear from my own son. That night, I made a decision I never wanted to face. I left. I packed a small bag, walked out of the home I'd built with love and sweat, and never looked back. The roof that once sheltered us was no longer a place of safety or love. It was the battlefield where my son declared he wanted me gone. That was the last night we shared a home. The pain was sharp, but beneath it was something deeper, a crushing disappointment that no mother's love can shield against. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just disappeared, because sometimes survival means stepping away from those you love the most. If you've ever felt unappreciated or taken for granted, you know the sting cuts deep. But this story isn't just about heartbreak. It's about the strength to protect yourself, even when your heart is breaking. Stay with me. There's more to come that you won't want to miss. I didn't cry when I walked away. There were no tears, no sobs, just a quiet resolve settling deep inside me. I knew this wasn't the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter, one I had to write alone. The moment I stepped outside that house, I made a decision. I wouldn't let bitterness consume me, but I wouldn't let my sacrifices be trampled on either. The very next day, I went to the bank. I closed the life insurance account I had opened in Trey's name years ago, the one where I had saved every extra dollar, every paycheck I could stretch to build a future for him. I withdrew all the money. It wasn't just money, it was a piece of my soul, years of sacrifice, blood, and hope. But now, it was mine to use as I saw fit. With that money and my retirement savings, I quietly bought a modest 2-bedroom home. The irony was not lost on me. This was the very property Trey was renting, but through a private sale no one knew about. I bought it through a holding company I set up called LH Legacy Holdings, LLC, a name that meant nothing to him. I was the landlord he never suspected, the silent force behind the walls he called home. Trey never knew his rent checks were landing in my account, the same account I controlled with quiet certainty. Every unpaid notice tossed in the trash was a reminder that I was watching, waiting, and in control while he thought he was free. I kept my distance, silent and unseen, as his reckless life continued to spiral. That house, once his refuge, became a symbol of what he had lost: my trust, my love, and the home I had built for him with my own 2 hands. I wasn't interested in revenge through anger or confrontation. I wanted him to feel the weight of his choices, the consequences of disrespecting the one who gave him everything. I had cared for him when no one else would. I had donated blood when he was at death's door. I had given him one of my kidneys when the doctors said it was his only hope. I had worked nights, sacrificed dreams, and saved quietly all for him. And when he chose to turn his back on me, I chose to take back what was rightfully mine, not out of spite, but self-respect. Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in silence. Sometimes love means walking away and protecting your heart. I learned that the hard way. If you've ever been taken for granted or felt invisible despite all you've given, you're not alone. This story is about the strength of standing tall even when your world falls apart. The journey isn't over, and what happens next will shock you. Trey's pride was a fortress one built on empty promises and borrowed time. He strutted around like he owned the world, bragging to his friends that the house he lived in was his. "Soon it'll all be mine," he said with a cocky grin, blind to the reality that was closing in on him like a storm. But reality doesn't wait for anyone, especially not for someone living on borrowed grace. One afternoon, the sheriff showed up at his door, holding an eviction notice that felt heavier than any weight he'd ever carried. No job to steady his steps, no savings to soften the fall, and no family left to lean on. The money I'd saved for him, the insurance policy he thought was his safety net, gone. Desperation drove him to call the insurance company, his voice shaking, disbelief dripping from every word. He was told, cold and clear, the policy was closed. Funds withdrawn by the account holder, Laverne Holloway. I could almost hear the sound of his world crashing down, the echo of every careless word, every night spent partying instead of working, every insult hurled like a dagger at the woman who had given him everything. His apartment emptied out like a ghost town, his belongings thrown into bags and boxes, left to gather dust in the corners of a life unraveling fast. Nights found him sleeping in a beat-up car, the cold biting through him as he faced the harsh truth of his choices. No calls for help, no pleas for forgiveness, just silence where love used to be. Pride doesn't protect you when the world turns against you. It only leaves you alone, stripped bare, and facing the consequences of the life you built on broken promises. Watching this unfold, I felt no joy in his downfall. Pain was all I felt, pain for the son who had once been my whole world, now lost to his own making. But I also felt something else. Relief. Relief that I was no longer chained to the chaos he created, free to live with dignity and peace. If this story hits close to home, if you've ever struggled to balance love and self-respect, hold on tight. This isn't just a tale of loss. It's a lesson in knowing when to hold on and when to let go. He showed up unannounced, the man who once called me every name but mother, now standing on my doorstep, a shadow of the boy I raised. Trey, disheveled and worn, got out of a sleek black sedan, the very picture of desperation wrapped in regret. His eyes, once filled with arrogance, now shimmered with tears I never thought I'd see. He ran to me, his voice cracking with raw emotion. "Mama, I messed up. Please, just give me one more chance." The words hung in the air, heavy with years of pain and mistakes. I looked at him, not with anger, not with hate, but with a quiet strength forged in decades of sacrifice and heartbreak. "I gave you my blood when you were dying. I gave you one of my kidneys so you could live. I gave you everything, my life, my dreams, my home. And you told me to die. So I did. The part of me that loved you died that night when you said those words." He fell to his knees, the weight of his actions crushing him, begging for forgiveness that wasn't mine to give. I turned slowly, walked into the house I bought with my own hands, the house he thought he owned, and I locked the door behind me. This wasn't just a house. It was my sanctuary, a symbol of a love so deep it hurt to let go. But some wounds run too deep, some words too cruel. Loving him didn't mean allowing him to break me. The lesson here, love isn't weakness. It's strength to know when to hold on, and courage to let go when respect is lost. Sometimes protecting your heart means walking away, even from the ones you love most. Trey's world shrank to the cold walls of a halfway shelter, a place far from the home he once mocked and took for granted. He became a ghost in his own life, avoiding people, shutting out the world, no friends, no family willing to reach out, no bridges left unburned. The neighborhood whispered behind closed doors, stories swirling about the fall of a man who lost everything. Yet I chose silence, never speaking a word about his downfall. I learned the hard way that a mother's love is fierce and unyielding, but it isn't infinite. It bends under the weight of disrespect. It cracks when it's ignored, and eventually it breaks when it's used as a doormat. I gave him my blood, my kidney, my home, and years of my life only to be met with cruelty and rejection. That's a pain no mother should endure. But real love is also wisdom. It's knowing when to protect yourself, when to stop sacrificing for someone who won't appreciate it. I walked away not because I stopped loving him, but because I chose to love myself enough to say, enough. There's power in setting boundaries, even with your own children. It's not about punishment, it's about respect. And sometimes respect has to come from the hardest lessons life teaches us. Now, I tend my garden in quiet peace, each flower a reminder of growth after pain. Trey sits alone in that shelter, his silence a consequence of choices made, pride lost, and love ignored. It's a painful truth. Love without respect is unsustainable. If you've faced a similar struggle, know you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to protect your heart, even if it means walking away from those you love most. If this story resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I want to hear your voice. Together, we learn, heal, and grow.